Hello, everyone. I'm Sue Pelland, and I have with me my guest, Irene Henion. And today on Sewing and Slippers with Sue, we're going to be talking all things binding with Irene Henion. Irene, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Irene, where are you coming from? Where do you live? Where do you work? What are you doing out there?
I live in Albion, New York, which is a small town near Lake Ontario. It is almost
Oh,
halfway between Rochester and Buffalo,
oh, what a beautiful
and
spot.
it is very pretty. It's very, very pretty. We get some snow, but not a ton unless it's the Christmas storm from last year. So, but it's a beautiful community, very small. And I taught here for 34 years, came here to start my teaching career as a Latin teacher because
Oh,
they happened to have an opening for a Latin teacher when I graduated from college. So I came here. I've I was married when I got here. I had two sons who are gorgeous and out on their own now, and one of them has made me a grandma twice just
oh,
recently
oh,
with
how
my little
fun.
boy. Yep, and have since then divorced and remarried, and we're still here in Albion. And I am actually coming to you from my friend Tara Tom has a quilt shop in Albion,
Oh.
New York on Bank Street. And her internet's a little better than my internet at home. And plus, I was able to use this beautiful quilt behind me as a backdrop.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Tell me first of all, what's the name of the quilt shop? And I'm going to put that in the comments.
Okay. The quilt shop is the Town and Country Quilt Shop. It is on Bank Street, 10 Bank Street in Albion, New York. It is run
10
by, yep, 10 Bank Street,
Bank, as in the
as in,
National Bank,
yeah, that one.
and
I couldn't think of
Albion.
it. Albion, yep, not Albany.
Wonderful.
My first
Albi-
husband, yeah, my first
Albion.
husband told everybody we were moving to Albany because he'd never heard of Albion, but they're
Oh,
totally
okay.
different.
Good. So we've got the quilt shop name in the comments.
Good.
Are you currently on the New England Shop Hop?
No, we are not part of that. New York State,
New York State
NHRA
is not.
is
Okay.
not part of that. We had a shop hop in June,
Hmm.
but it was more of a local, like a Western New York shop
Okay.
hop.
Okay, great.
Though I understand the powers that be are looking at possibly doing a statewide one
Oh,
in 2025. It's going to take
fun.
them that long to get it organized.
Fun.
So
So Irene, correct me if I'm wrong. Albion is kind of out in the country, right?
yes.
And do you have a farm out there?
Um,
It.
yes, I grew up on a farm. My father had a dairy farm for years and then switched over to beef cattle. But when I came up here, I've had more animals, but right now we have a goat and 8 chickens
Hmm.
and the neighborhood cats that come to hang out with us.
I see.
So yeah, so we just have, we have property which a farm girl like me needs, and I can go outside and sit in my yard and not worry about anybody watching me. So
I love it. I love it. So you're at this quilt shop in Albion, and
yes.
you work there. You teach there. What do you do at the shop?
Yes, it is run, as I said, by Tara Tom. Tara Tom was a student of mine in Latin class, and when I decided to retire, she has been a long arm quilter for well over 20 years. And she's, I'm very, I taught very young, let's just say that. But anyway, she's been quilting for 20 years, and she decided to open her own shop once her kids got into school.
Okay,
So
great.
she opened this shop on Bank Street, and I had retired from teaching. So I have helped her out. I do, if she has bindings that need to be done, like I'm going to show you today, I do those. I also, wait on people and things. I'm also in charge of the class schedule. I organize the teachers, the locations, the everything. And I love it. It's not really work when
Okay,
you come
so
here.
so another thing that people should know about you is you are also a Studio 180 certified instructor.
Yes, I went and got my certification in 2020, right before the shutdown.
Mm-hmm.
And I teach some Deb Tucker classes, Studio 180 classes here. So, matter of fact, I have multiple samples here, and a couple of them are Deb Tucker. So, I also do samples for Tara. So, I have a wide range of, I don't follow just one designer, but obviously I follow Sue Cullen too.
And I
So,
love it.
so yeah, so it's, I enjoy teaching. I've always enjoyed teaching. Obviously, it was my profession for 34 years. And teaching quilting is even more fun because usually the students really want to be here.
Yes, and not learning Latin.
No, not learning.
And it's not quite as difficult as learning Latin.
No. Though some people will differ with you, but I love it. I love to teach.
So we're going to keep our demonstration today fun, light, and easy. We're going to be teaching, or Irene's going to be teaching me, a method of binding by machine. So before we take that away, and before we give the screen totally to Irene so she can walk us through the binding process, I just want to preface this with a little bit of information. First of all, before we do anything, let's describe that quilt behind you, Irene. What is that quilt that is hanging at the shop?
That is my temperature quilt that I did with Sue. And we are going to, after I chit-chat with Sue at the retreat this fall, we are going to hopefully offer it to students next year as a sew-along type thing. But I love it. Stuff figured out. But we put it up so that people got an idea of what it is. When it goes to the big screen, you'll see that over on the side, there's the key as to what temperatures are what colors.
Okay.
But I'm amazed at the interest in this quilt.
I love
this
it.
was from 2022.
Yes.
Right? Yes, 2022. Yes. And we had that big Christmas storm. So on December, it was actually a very warm year for us. But I've never been so fascinated with temperatures in my life as when I did this. But it's interesting. You can see right where the storm was. And then it warmed up right after that for the end of December. So
wonderful.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
Yeah.
And it was a learning curve. I can do leaves now with my eyes closed almost. So, but I loved it. And everybody's so interested. On the back is for my label. It says what the quilt is, what year it was, and then it also has that scale on the back.
Yeah,
also.
Perfect.
The only thing I realized I didn't put anywhere, so I'm going to have to add a label, is my location.
Oh, yes.
I never put that it was Albion, New York.
Okay.
So somebody pointed that out to me, so
yeah, that would be important.
Add a little label on there.
So just for people's information, that is called the Cherrywood Leaves temperature quilt, and that was our 2022 block of it was actually a block of the day, and we did that as a group, and now it's available as a course on the Sue Cullen Designs website. So it's called Cherrywood Leaves because we have a nice collaboration with Cherrywood Hand-Dyed Fabrics, and she provided all of the fabrics for my quilt, and we offered a kit at that time. Now that kit is still available from Cherrywood Fabrics, but it's not in the colors that Irene did. What I love about this quilt is you can choose your own background, choose your own colors for all of the different temperatures, and make this quilt your own. And I just love the colors that you chose, Irene. Your quilt is stunning, and it reminds me of citrus, right? It's got all the yellows and oranges and reds and greens. It's gorgeous. So you chose your colors well.
Thank you.
So Irene has been working with me for the past several years as an ahead of the curve member, and she has learned everything there is to know about using the Supelin Designs technique for rotary cut applique. So Irene and her sister Bev Henion, Bev is from Maine, Irene is from New York, as you heard, and Bev and Irene hold a retreat every year up at the Schoodic Institute in Acadia National Park. So this year, once again, last year was my first year, but this year, once again, they've asked me to come and teach rotary cut applique at the retreat. Well, last year at the retreat, Irene was doing a demonstration of binding by machine. And binding is one of those things that often stops people in their tracks. Or if you're new to quilting, binding may not be something that you feel really comfortable with. Even if you love binding and you do it by hand, you're going to want to hear Irene's fabulous tips and tricks for putting a binding on by machine. Now, when would this be appropriate, Irene? What quilts do you bind by machine? And then I'll chime in and tell you what I would use this for.
Well, I bind by machine for many reasons. Number one, it's more durable. So any child's quilt, if it's a quilt they're gonna drag around and gonna be washed multiple times, I think machine binding is much more advantageous. It lasts a
Yes.
lot longer. I also bind by machine because I like the look. I really like the look of it. Some people don't, and for some people, it's just not part of their repertoire. They'd rather have that nice poofy binding. You're not going to get a poofy binding with a machine binding. You're going to get a nice flat binding. The other reason I do it is I am very impatient, and I don't do any hand sewing whatsoever.
Okay.
I can't. I have too many things going on, and I know for some people they tell me, oh, it's so relaxing, I do it while I watch TV, and I'm like, okay, first of all, I don't watch TV, and second of all, I want to be on to the next project. I want to create. I
Yes.
don't even like doing backings and borders. I don't even like it. I just want to create. So I started doing these bindings. It was scary at first, but what really pushed me was we had a gentleman come in like a week before Christmas to the shop, and his wife had passed away in the summer. He was cleaning and found 3 quilts and quilt tops, and he wanted to have them done and give to his daughters, grown daughters, for Christmas.
Oh, what a beautiful
Now,
gift.
if you know anything about long arm quilting, we're like right now, we don't have any Christmas spots left, and
Right.
it's September.
Right.
So Tara, being the gracious woman she is, spent a lot of time here on her own time, which she does anyway, but then she got all 3 of them done, and I said, if you'll quilt them, I'll bind them.
Yes.
And that taught me more about machine binding than I could have, because I did 3 consecutive quilts.
Excellent.
So
Excellent. Well,
I
what a
enjoy it.
gift. What a gift to those daughters and that
Yes,
kind man that was thoughtful enough to bring those quilt tops to you. So
yes.
you got a crash course in machine binding and you haven't looked back. You use machine
No,
binding for most of your quilts.
yep. Especially table runners and things like that are going to get bumped and moved
Yep.
and washed and stuff. I love machine binding. The only ones I've ever had hand bound, I put 2 quilts in a show years ago and quickly realized that's not my thing.
Yes.
But I paid a wonderful woman in Maine, Mama Lois, and she hand bound them for me
Okay.
because I thought at the time, and it probably was true at the time, that's what they wanted. So
Now,
they
is that
looked
not
at
true?
it.
Is that not true anymore? Do they accept
I
machine bindings now more
They
in a
do,
judge show?
yes.
Yeah.
I I shouldn't say yes. I've heard they do. I have not put mine into a show, so that's not my thing. I
Yeah.
like usable quilts. I don't like show quilts,
Yeah.
you know.
Absolutely.
So, but I think it's becoming more widely accepted.
Okay, so I have one more question for you before I let you get on to the demonstration, because this is so interesting to me. You said you love practical quilts. You love quilts that you're going to use a lot. So why did you start doing applique?
It was it was a challenge, and I love the look that your applique has. And I don't, I did a little tiny bit before I met you, but I can't stand the cutting on it just drives, because again, I'm not a patient woman. So when you showed me a way to cut out these leaves 12 at a time, that was right up my alley. And I
Okay.
will say that this was a challenge to my inability to stay focused. But once I saw it coming together, and
It gave you the motivation.
now I'm looking at a way to combine um, your applique and Deb Tucker's to us. So
Absolutely. Deb and I have been talking about that for years.
yeah,
And Tina Dillard and I did a
yeah,
little bit together,
Tina's a
but
good friend.
we would like to do more. We'd like to do more pieced quilts with applique borders or piece applique centers with beautiful piece borders. The combination to me is perfect. It's perfection when you can use both skills. So I was kind of tongue in cheek when I asked you, why did you turn to applique? Because the answer is applique can be just as easy as piecing. You're putting patches onto a background that already have fusible on the back. You're designing something absolutely lovely and you're stitching it down by machine. I can get my applique quilts done as fast as a pieced quilt, and there's no corners that don't match.
Yep.
So it really truly is a quick applique method that everyone can use. And I just wanted to kind of tee that up because for somebody that doesn't, you say you don't have the patience, by the way, I love to sit in hand sew a binding. To me, that's very relaxing as well. But I am like you with my projects. I'm ready to design. I don't want to make a backing. I don't want to put on borders.
Mhm.
I just want to design beautiful applique quilts like the one you see behind Irene and the one you see behind me here. So that's wonderful. I'm glad that we were able to talk a little bit about how applique has made its way into your world and how you're going to be combining applique and piece quilts together, which to me is just like the cream of the crop. It's the best of both worlds. You are truly an expert when you can
Oh,
design
thank you.
quilts with applique and piecing together. So congratulations, you have just really elevated your game. So you're going to elevate my game because when I don't want to enter a quilt into a show, when it's truly a quilt that's going to be used and loved, which is 90% of my quilts,
Mhm.
I want to learn how to do a machine binding as beautifully as you do, Irene. So
Okay.
I'm going to let you take it away. And I'm
Okay.
actually going to go off camera for a bit so that you can have the full screen and we'll get the true picture of what Irene does with her bindings. Let's
Okay.
see. Okay, I'm going to give you that screen. No, I'm going to try to go off screen. And then I'll come back in from time to time just to ask you
Okay.
questions. All right, great. Irene's going to be able to share her camera with us, including the camera at her sewing machine. So we're truly going to give a beautiful tutorial here of how to do a machine binding. Irene, take it away.
Thank you. As I was prepping for this, I really, for every person out there that quilts, they have their own method for binding. So I'm just going to tell you what I do and what I've learned. And, take it or leave it. Hopefully, you can pick up a couple of really good pointers. So, all right, I have prepped my strip. Now, for those of you who are brand new, I use 2 1/4 when I'm doing machine binding, which is for me all the time. But I read somewhere that if you're doing machine binding, you should do 2 1/4, and if you're doing hand binding, you should use 2 1/2. Now, if you're nervous about using 2 1/4, that's fine. I started out using 2 1/2. I thought I'll never be able to do it with 2 1/4. But I have learned that it's just looks nicer with 2 1/4. So I have my 2 1/4 inch strips, okay? And I join them just like you would. As soon as I figure out this was out of a wide fabric. So I'm trying to find where I joined them. Okay, it wasn't that wide. What are we doing here? All right, anyway, you join them on the diagonal. Just, you lay it down. I laid it down like this. Okay, sewed across, and then trimmed. I eyeball it. You can measure it if you like to be perfect. I learned that I'm not perfect, so I just eyeballed it and then pressed it flat. While I was pressing it flat, I have it all strung out. I also folded it in half. So I've got my raw edges, okay, wrong sides together, raw edges, so that I have a nice little strip. Okay, so I did that to the whole thing. And knowing how much to use is another whole lesson. You probably already know that, but I tend to use extra because I'd rather have too much than not enough, because then I gotta break my thread, go over, join another strip, probably cut it. So I tend to do lots of extra. I have a whole thing full of little 2 1/4 inch strips that I've had. I'm going to switch my computer here. I want to put it so that you can look down on my quilt. This is a quilt I did as a sample, and for Tara's shop years ago. You can see I tend not to get things caught up. Okay, so anyone who knows me knows that I absolutely love purple and green. Absolutely love it. So this was a really pretty line, but we weren't able to get a lot of it. We were a new shop and we kind of waited a little too long. But this is a beautiful runner. I have my strip. What I'm going to do is pick a spot. Now, if this were a gigantic quilt, a very wonderful woman who was one of the teachers that taught me about binding said, start your binding in the bottom left corner, because people don't look there. They tend to look to the top, to the very bottom, or to the right. So this is a runner. I'm not going to start it on the short edge. So what I'm going to do is go part way up, and I'm just going to pin it. And I'm a little weird about my pins. Okay, I have certain pins for this and certain pins for that. So I happen to use these big yellow quilting pins, yellow head quilting pins. And now, some people don't do this. Tara is one of them. She does not attach her binding all the way around. I do, because when I get to this corner, I don't want to have a joint. So where I joined them together, because it won't lay flat. So I go around and pin it. The other reason I pin it is because I'm always in a hurry. My whole life, my father always said, you are always in a hurry. When I get to the machine, I just want to sew. I don't want to finagle all of this. All right, I've gotten to my corner. I got to turn my corner. So what I do is I lay it out and hang it over here. Then I roll it up to a right angle. Okay, it should be a very perfect right angle, right into that corner. Okay, then I bring it back down. Now, I want to show you a couple things. They should match. Okay, I don't know if you could see that because they're both purple, but they should match and make a perfect square. Okay, and then you're going to keep going and keep going. Now, what if I find out that there's a joint? I'm going to go back here and move it up. Okay, just because that's a little bugaboo I have about that, is I don't like that joint. Now, sometimes it's not avoidable, so you just do the best you can. Press it as flat as you can get it. Chances are you're the only one who's going to know it's there. And again, this is not show quality, okay? This is give it to your grandchild and let him drag it around quality. That's what these are. Or put it on the table and watch somebody dump something from dinner, like Kool-Aid or something like that on it. That's what these are. Again, I flipped it over, and I'm just going to go all the way around. Now, when I get, some of these pins really aren't very sharp. I think they need some, oh, I bent that one. I'm so strong. Not really. It's just a crappy pin. All right. So I just keep going. Keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going. Okay. And I'm not going to bore you. I'm going to do a real fast pin here because it's pretty much the same thing.
Yeah, take your time, Irene. We're enjoying watching this process. And I've made a couple of comments over in the comment section.
Cool.
I use 2 1/4 for all my bindings, whether it's hand or machine. I like a 2 1/4 better by hand as well. It's a little tighter, and it goes, the front and the back are equal rather than the back being a little bit bigger. I also love the way you do all your pinning first. If I had the patience to do that, I think it would probably actually speed up the process. And I'm going to give you another great reason for pinning first. You're doing this flat on a table.
Yep.
You are making sure there's no waves in the edges of your quilt. If you're seeing any wavy edges on your quilt, if it's not laying flat, you can adjust your binding a little bit. You know, you can pat the quilt flat on the table and then ease it in with your binding so you don't end up with ripply edges. And you're not going to stretch your edges even more. If you go straight to your sewing machine, you don't know if those edges are laying flat. But by doing it on a table, you'll know. And that's going to give you more straight, accurate edges. Yeah, great. Okay, I'm going to go off screen again, but I didn't want you to think I deserted you.
All right, so I have come all the way around. I am going to, and again, this is the way I do it. I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but this is a combination of a number of teachers who have taught me, and I am going to leave this droopy. Actually, I'm going to back up this pin a little bit. I want plenty of room. The worst part, I don't think it's bad now, but when I started, the worst part of this whole process is, how do I join this? How do I make this perfect? So I'm going to show you how I was taught by a wonderful woman on an Etsy class, and I really wish I remembered her name because she was amazing. And I'm going to try to do some research. It was years ago, so I don't know. But what the next step is, just leave these. If you've got, I know that's way more than I need. Again, I tend to do that. You can even pin them together or clip them so they don't flop all over. On a quilt, I just leave them hanging because you got that great big quilt. Now what you're going to do is you're going to take it to your machine and you are going to do 1/4 inch. I'm going to show you the corner, okay? I have another one that's already sewed around that I'll show you the joining, but I want to show you how I deal with the corner. So I'm going to switch my camera, and then I apologize if it's a little blurry, but this is the camera on the sewing machine. There we go.
Okay, I think it's going to be clear enough, Irene. I'm not too worried about it. So you're going to show us the corner, because that was my first question. When you've pinned that corner down, how do you handle the corner? So that'll be a great demo. And the second thing I want to say is Debbie Went. She's a friend of mine and she's a guild member. She actually created the Brilliant Bindings tool, and it's made for putting your ends together. And her YouTube video on putting ends together is fabulous. She has it on her website as well. So it's wentquilting.com. And you can find Debbie Went's Brilliant Bindings tool at your local quilt shop or on her website. It's just a wonderful way to put your ends together if you're getting stuck on that step. So she's a great teacher. We just had a presentation by Deb at my guild meeting. And here is her Brilliant bindings
Oh, wow.
tool. It was the first trapezoid shaped binding tool, and it's got all of the measurements. It's got your 1/4 of an inch here, it's got all your measurements for all different size bindings, and it's got a 1/2 of an inch marking here that gives you your 2/4 inches. So when you're putting your ends together, this tool makes it super easy. So okay, just a little plug from my friend Deb. She was one of the original ones to show an awesome way to put your ends together. So take it away, Irene.
Okay. Now, normally I would start way back here, okay, way back where I put my first pin, okay? But I'm going to scoot down here a little bit so I can show you the corner, because this was always a bugaboo for me between joining it and putting the corner on. Now, I have my 1/4 inch foot, and I cheat. I've got a little guide, but that's because, once again, I can sew faster, and that's pretty much my world. So this is a little awkward for me because I have a camera right in front of the machine. So I'm pretty sure I can do this, but don't judge me. Okay, here we go. So I don't backstitch because I may need to take a little bit out to do my connector, and I'll show you what I mean when I connect them. So I'm just going to, oh, hang on. I'm at 2.5. I'm going to take it down to 2.2, and that's just to give it a little more strength, so that we can scoot along here. Hang on, it slowed it down when I transported it. Okay, a little bit too fast. There we go. No, don't jump up and down. All right, so I am just doing my 1/4 inch, and again, I'm cheating by using the guide because I can do it faster. Now, when I get close to my corner, I'm going to go a little bit more so you can see it better. All right here's my pin. I'm going to take that out and probably promptly lose it. Hang on, there, we'll do that. And I'm going to make a mark. Now, you can use a Frixion pen. You can use whatever you want to use, but I use a pencil. It's because it doesn't leak through and it doesn't show, because this will all be turned over. So I am going to go to here. Here's my corner. Okay, can you see that? That's my corner. I need to go to about a 1/4 of an inch. Now, when I started, I measured everything. I got my little ruler out, my teeny tiny ruler, and I figured out I need to be a 1/4 in and a 1/4 up. Now I eyeball it. So my finger is about a 1/4 of an inch. So I know a 1/4 inch up is probably about there, and a 1/4 inch over is somewhere there. Now, because this is purple, you can't see my mark. But there, I have put a dark mark right there. And what I'm going to do is come on, you can start. It doesn't like me sitting off to the side. Let me turn that there. There you go. There we go. I'm going to go up to that mark. Now my needle is in the mark. Okay? Then, this is tricky because I can't get to the side. I'm going to turn it, rotate it. If I was really good at measuring, it'll come, let me show you the pencil, it'll come right off that corner. And I did a pretty good job, believe it or not. So I'm going to go right off the corner, and I'm going to break my thread. All right? Now I can rotate my quilt or my table runner here. I'm going to flip it back up the way I had it. I want to make sure of two things. This is a little cockeyed. I really shouldn't sit this back on the machine. Okay. I want to make sure of two things. I want to make sure that I'm covering the corner, okay? And that this is straight. This little, it looks like a little flap there. Okay, I want these edges straight. And then I'm going to lay it down. And I'm going to start again. And I'm not back stitching, I'm just going. Come on, you can do it. There you go. So it just goes through, and I just keep going. All right. Now, I want to break my thread and show you what that looks like. Okay. So it just looks like that. Okay. So when I turn this, it'll be a mitered corner without all the threads. Okay. So that's how, I mean, I know some people don't break their thread and some people. Oh, the other thing you'll notice, I skipped this step. I trim right up to the edge. Some people leave a little bit out here and then trim it after they sew this on. I don't do that. One reason is if you were to put this out a little too far and you cut this when you're trimming, that will be very sad because that won't work. You're going to have to go back and do the whole thing again. So I trim it down completely and lay it right on the edge. I know people who don't do it that way. So, like I said, for every person, there's a way to do it. Let me switch my camera because I want to show you something.
Okay.
How we're going to do it.
While you do that, I'm going to agree with you. I straighten my edges first. So I actually bring it over to my rotary cutter, use my long rulers. I use my quilter's chalk line to straighten up that edge. So I do that first on the floor of my basement. It's a carpeted floor. So I'm able to put a T-pin in one end, stretch that chalk line all the way to the other end of the quilt and square up those edges. And before I do any cutting, I make sure that I've got 4 square corners, 90-degree corners, and 4 straight sides. Then I use my straight edge and my rotary cutter to cut off those edges so it's nice and even. And then I add my binding. That's the only way you're going to get a perfectly straight binding is if your edges were perfectly straight in the first place. So people are saying they can't see my comments on Facebook. That's interesting. I'm not going to worry about that right now. I'm just going to jump in every now and then and give you my comments. But Irene, fabulous job. I'm going to remove myself so we can see you full screen.
Okay. All right. So this is one of those Deb Tucker designs. It's from a wedge star tool. And I made this when the wedge star tool came out. And then it got quilted. Tara does all my quilting, by the way. I'm not even patient enough to quilt. And it got put away because it was for me. Things that are for me don't get done as well as things that are for other people. So I have sewn all the way around. See, my corners are flipping up like that. Excuse me. So now I need to join these. And I don't have a fancy tool, though I may check that out. So, excuse me, I'm sorry. So, what I need to do is I need to figure out where I'm going to join this. I have left about that much space. How much is that? On here, it's about 10 inches. On a big quilt, it might be a little more because it's harder to move around, but somewhere in there. And then what I'm going to do is figure out where I put my scissors. Hang on just a second. Hang on.
No worries. While you're looking for those scissors, Irene, 10 inches is a great amount, but I love what you said earlier. Don't backstitch when you are sewing on your binding because you may need an extra inch or two to maneuver around, but I think 10 inches is a great size to leave open. That's what I work with as well. Of course, I just do it by eye. And I love what you said about as you're coming around the corner, fold that flap together and see if those edges, those flap edges are straight as well. I never thought of that, but it's absolutely necessary. And look, your scissors match your quilt. How beautiful.
Actually, they're Tara's scissors. I went out and stole them off the long arm. So I left a whole bunch of stuff at home. But anyway, I'm figuring out about center. Okay, I could measure it, but I eyeball most things. I'm going to cut right here. Just one strip. Don't cut them both. You'll cry. So we've got that cut. Now, what I need is I need an overlap of the equal to the width of my strip plus a 1/4 inch. And I'll tell you why. So what I do is I put my little ruler down, and my strip is 2 1/4. So I'm going to cut it at 2 1/2. So I'm going to line up with the 2 1/2. Now, couple very important warnings here. When you go to cut this, only cut the top strip. Don't cut the bottom or you will cry because you got to start over. So I'm only cutting the top strip at 2 1/2. So I have an overlap of 2 1/2 inches. Now, this is where it gets a little weird because the woman who taught me was fantastic, and she used these, as a teacher, I understand using mnemonic devices, which are things that help you remember. So she would call these, she'd pull up these 2 strips, open them up, and treat them like they were dolphins. And I know that's weird, but the dolphins are going to jump out of the water, they're going to kiss, and they're going to turn. Now, this is one of those situations where I didn't leave myself a little enough. Okay, I don't have my seam ripper here with me. I forgot everything. I'm not kidding. I think I was so concerned about cameras and machine, and there we go.
No worries, Irene. Happens to me all the time. I'm always going off camera to grab something that I forgot.
Oh,
But
and I thought I was so prepared.
you are. This is wonderful. I love what you said about the dolphins. That is so easy to remember. The
Here's
dolphins,
my dolphins.
and they jump up,
out,
they
kiss,
kiss, and they
turn.
turn. I put that in the comments, and once this is posted to Facebook, you'll be able to see.
Cool. So I'm going to scrunch this up a little because I need to have the room. Now, the reason I went a 1/4 inch bigger than the width of my strip is because I'm going to leave a 1/4 inch here and a 1/4 inch here. So 1/4 inch here, excuse me, 1/8 inch here, 1/8 inch here. That's your extra 1/4. Now, most people line them up, okay? I'll show you why I don't. I'm going to pin it, and it's going to act just like when I was joining it, when I was joining my strips together. Okay, keep it straight, like that. Now, another thing she taught me was, think of this as a pair of pants. Okay, here's a leg, here's a leg. You want to sew across the band. You do not want to sew up the crotch. That will be bad. Okay, so you're going to sew across the band, not up the crotch. Okay, that's another little mnemonic device. All right, I could use a little more space. See why you leave so much space? The smaller they are, sometimes I think they're harder to do the little ones than they are to do the big ones. I do a lot of big quilts. Matter of fact, I got 3 at home I got to get done. One's a sample. All right, so back here, I have my dolphins are pinned together now. I'm going to go to my machine and I'm going to sew. You got to scrunch it up. Okay, scrunch it up. Then you're going to go to your machine and you're going to sew across there. I'm not going to switch the camera because that's pretty, oh, maybe I should. Hang on, I'll switch it.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea to switch it because that sewing can get a little tricky. And here's a little tip: when you scrunch it up like that, I put a big old pin in there, and I keep some hat pins, not
Oh,
hat
that's a
pins,
good idea.
corsage pins, because they're really heavy. So when I scrunch up that quilt, I'll pin those layers together so it doesn't unscrunch on me constantly as I'm trying to sew it. So there's a little tip.
Oh, that's
And
awesome.
so by leaving the 1/8 inch overhang on both ends, you can sew from, what do you call that? Like little
I call
divot
it
to divot.
V. Yeah, the little V's. And that's another reason I do it. That was not too very well. I'm actually a lot better than this. It's just trying to do everything with the camera.
I'll
All right.
let you get full screen.
All right. So yeah, I call it the little V's. There's a little V where it overhangs right there. And there's a little V down here. And I'm going to start, I just got to make sure it stays straight. And again, your idea of pinning to scrunch is so good. All right, so I'm going to, even though I still have my 1/4 inch, but I'm going to change that in a minute. But all right, I'm going to get it started. Now, I also was told, and this was by a waitress carrying a whole tray of things, is that you look to where you want to end, not where you're sewing. You're going to aim it for the end. Oh, I did it. There. And so don't cut anything yet, okay? Because you're going to want to check. I'm switching again. Hope I don't make you seasick.
Not at all.
Oh. So what you're going to want, so this is what I sewed, okay? What you're going to want to do before you trim this is you are going to want to do this. Pull it tight. And look how perfect that is. It lays perfectly flat.
Oh, that's
So
beautiful, Irene. It is perfectly flat.
I love it. So
Excellent.
now, if yours was not flat, you can go back, take this seam out, and adjust it. So if it's scrunched up, you need to give it a little more berth. If it's too big and it's going to pucker, you need to bring it in a little. So, but don't cut it until you test it to make sure you're okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and I'm going to, and again, I eyeball, if you like it measured, I'm trying to cut about 1/4 inch and then cut my V's in so nothing hangs out. So I end up with these things, okay? And now I'm just going to finger press this. I'm not worried about it because once I roll it, it's going to be fine. All right, maybe if I can get my fingers in there. There we go. So now I've rolled it flat. And now I take it back to the machine and I sew across. And just, from where I left off. And I could do that.
Okay. So I think we get that part, and we're
Okay.
running a little bit low on time. So let's get to the machine stitching part to
Okay.
to finish that other side.
All right. What I've done is let me show you real quick. I'll show on the other end of this one. When I get it all sewed on, I take it to my ironing board and I press this up. Okay. I press it up and I press it in. Okay. This one's still warming up. So I press it up, press it in. Then I roll it over, and I would do the whole thing. I'm trying to hurry so I can show you the stitching. Then I press this again, and then I just roll it, turn it, and you can be exact. You can measure. You can do all kinds of cool things. I'm usually in too much of a hurry, so I just roll it over, and I use these. They're clover clips. Okay, let me put it down so you can see it. With the flat side up, I clip it. I turn my corner, I press it, and then I clip it again. The reason you're going to put the flat sides up, because that's the bottom of it, is because, now I'll show you the one I got done, is because I'm going to sew from the top, not the bottom. So I want it so that when I push down on this clip, it comes off easier. It also allows my piece to lay flatter on the sewing machine table.
That is a great tip, Irene. And I'm just going to make a little plug here. I got these quilty clips, and this is a Riley Blake pattern. And the tin is so adorable with the little bluebirds on it. You've got 100 quilt clips in there. And I like these just as well, or maybe even a little bit better than the clover clips. Look how flat they are. And I can see exactly what you're saying. If you put the flat part on the bottom, then it's going to ride along your sewing machine table really flat. So great tip. I love this. So you sewed your quilt onto the front, flipped it to the back, but you're going to sew the decorative stitching from the front again. So your clips are going to keep that back exactly where you want it to be.
And the reason I sew it from the front is because I care more what the front looks like than the back.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So
good tip.
I want the front to be perfect. And if I sew it onto the back, which I did once because I didn't, it was horrible. I would take the whole thing off.
Yeah, it's not going to look pretty from the front if you're sewing it from the back. So great tip. Let's watch you sew this from the front. Tell us all about the stitches that.
All right, what I'm using is I've got my open toe foot, and I use a serpentine stitch. Now I have a Bernina, and I'm using the 590, but my 350 has the same stitch, and they all probably do. It's number 4 of the regular stitches. So if I hit number 4, I can adjust how wide it is and how long it is. You don't need it to be super tight, but you want it tight enough that it's going to cover everything. So as I put this down, I'm going to run, I'm using purple so you can see it. And there's purple in here. I love color. So I usually use 2D thread that is variegated. But I was afraid it would like wash out, you wouldn't see it. So I'm just going to use purple. Now I'm just using a serpentine stitch. I am running the inside edge right along this foot, this part of the foot. And I am just running away. Now, if I get a little ways and I think it's either too short or too long, I can adjust it. Again, it's not going to a show. I don't care. So I'll just keep going. Now, another thing, I'm sorry, I'm so annoyed. Another thing you can do is you could use a decorative stitch. So I have a couple decorative stitches that I really like. One is a flower and one is a leaf pattern. And I've used those, especially on table runners. I don't use them on full-size quilts because I would be there all day. It also takes a tremendous amount of thread if you use a decorative stitch on a quilt.
Okay. Hey, Irene.
Yep.
We're having a little trouble hearing you at the machine there, but are you going to show us turning that corner?
Yep, I'm going to turn the corner right now.
Okay, so, and again, please keep in mind, I'm not a professional, more or less. So I get as close to the edge as I can, because I'm doing a serpentine stitch, so I want it over to this side. Then I lift my foot. Okay, I'm going to only go part way on this one because of where it ended up. Then I'm going to go back. And then I'm going to try to get it to behave. Give it a little bit of, come on, you can do it. There you go. So now we're going. Now, if way off, I will go to the end, break the thread, and start over. Okay? This one I should have because it's purple, so I'll probably end up tearing this out and doing it over again. But let me show you very quickly, and then I will break this so you can see it. I have a very cute stitch. I'll do this one for a little bit so you can see it, and then I'll pull this out and I'll put it under the. But you can use anything on this. But again, I wouldn't do a super decorative one that takes a lot of thread because you are going to have a big thread.
Irene, I hate for you to have to take out all of those decorative stitches. There's so many stitches in there. So don't go too far.
All right, let me stop that. I'll put it under the camera so you can see it a little better.
Excellent.
Actually,
Excellent.
it didn't work very well, but you'll get, let me show you the serpentine. I'm going to switch cameras again. I'll show you the serpentine. The decorative one really didn't work too well because I'm not sitting at my machine the right way. All right.
Yeah, for those of you, it's awfully hard working with the camera at your machine because the camera is right where you need to be looking. So we get it, Irene. Don't worry about it, but we just want to get the gist of what you're doing.
So that's the serpentine right there. And see, I don't like the way my corner looks, so I'll probably take that out, but it makes a pretty stitch. Now, normally, if I were making this for someone, I would use green variegated thread on this instead of purple, but I wanted it to show up. Now, this was my horrible attempt at making a cute little flower, but it wasn't moving forward the correct way. But I go all the way around, and then when you get to the end, so as I come around, okay, I may have to be a little creative here. Again, if it's a thread that doesn't match, that isn't as obvious, you can just go over it. If it's a very obvious thread, you may have to maneuver your fabric a little bit to make it match. If it means that much to you. Most of the time, it doesn't mean that much to you. But
yeah, definitely with the variegated green thread, that 2D
Yes.
would be perfect on that fabric. Yeah, it'll blend in beautifully.
I'll definitely tear this out and start over.
Yes, of course. And I feel badly that you have to do that, but thank you. Thank you for showing us in such detail of all of the steps to your binding. And earlier when Irene and I were discussing this prior to coming online, she said, how basic do you want me to get? And I said, absolutely. Minute detail, because everybody does their bindings differently. And if you do yours differently, you're going to pick up a couple of neat tips here from Irene, and you do beautiful bindings. So when I saw that serpentine stitch at the retreat at Schoodic, I said, you know what? That is a great permanent binding that's going to really stand the test of time.
So on the back, what you're going to notice is you do have a little bit of a lip, and the purists don't like that lip. I don't care.
Yeah,
it's
right.
fine with me. So,
Right.
But yeah, I get a lot more done. Put it that way.
Excellent. So one of the Facebook users just asked, can she see the back where it's stitched? So we just did that.
Yeah.
And Marilyn says, thanks, Irene and Sue. This was wonderful. Somebody else said, please show the back. So thank you for doing that. And they say, we love your V blocks that you're using in the sample. They're gorgeous.
It's a Deb Tucker.
Oh, that's another nice one. Yeah. Yeah, beautiful.
It's just a sample block.
Excellent. And another Facebook user says, when I scrunch, I use quilt clips to keep the quilt scrunched together so it makes it easier for sewing. So all of these wonderful tips. I thank you so much for your detailed instructions on bindings.
Thank you for inviting me.
It has been
my career.
Well, it's my pleasure. You're such a wonderful teacher. So, Irene, if people wanted to connect with you as a teacher, they would find you over at the quilt shop.
Yeah.
Is that the best way?
Well, I also have my own business name, which is Irene's Fabric Creations. Okay, that's my business. My email is quiltgirl@irenesfabriccreations.com.
Okay, I'm going to ask you to type that into the comments.
Okay.
If you can see the comments, Quilt Girl at Irene's Fabric Creations. That way you can reach out to Irene directly if you would like to have a program for your guild on Deb Tucker products, or on some beautiful applique quilts, or on bindings. I think this was a fabulous little mini workshop and program. So, Irene, what quilt are you currently working on? What's your latest project?
How many of them? I tend to run 3 or 4 quilts at a time.
Yes.
I am working on clamshells.
Okay.
It's not calf clamshells, it's Jason Yenter's clamshells.
Oh, beautiful. I love his fabric lines. They are wonderful.
I'm also working on an Alaska quilt using Deb Tucker tools.
Excellent.
And I'm working on Studio 180 has Tucker University. And I am working on my sophomore year sample quilt, which is where you design it yourself.
Oh, fantastic.
Well, yep.
Congratulations on being a Deb Tucker certified instructor.
Thank you.
Irene, you are so competent with my tools that you are also certified to teach rotary cut applique. So, and I know you're going to be teaching at the shop that you're working at. Yep. So you can reach out to Irene also. Tell us the name of the shop again. It's
The Town and Country Quilt Shop.
The Town and Country Quilt Shop.
And it's the one in Elby, New York, not the one in Ontario, Canada.
Okay.
We didn't realize there was another one, but so.
That happened with my shop too. We had quilters' quarters, and so did several other people around the country. We were always getting each other's orders. So, Irene, we are coming up on our October getaway week. It's not a weekend, it's a week-long retreat up at the Schoodic Peninsula in Acadia National Park. So could you just type in Bev's information in the chat? People are not seeing my comments, so I'm hoping they're going to see yours, but I'm sure when this is posted to Facebook, you will be able to go back to that chat and see all of mine and Irene's comments. If you have any interest in coming up to Acadia National Park and spending 6 or 5 full days, 6, how does that work?
Yeah. 5 full days of sewing.
5 full days of sewing. So we get in, set up, and then we've got 5 full days of sewing. So that is in October, late October. We will be up at the Schoodic Institute. So reach out to Bev Henion if you would like more information about the retreat at Schoodic. Irene, Bev's sister, will be there with us, and I'm sure we'll get to see some of her beautifully bound quilts in person. When we do a retreat like that, I bring quilts to show for show and tell, and so do all of the attendees. So it's a really fun evening. The first evening that we get there, we celebrate being together with a little bit of show and tell. So Irene, I can't wait to see some of your quilts and those beautiful serpentine bindings. Excellent. Well, thank you for Bev put in her email address. Thank you so much.
And I'm not seeing it either, so I don't know if they saw mine. But afterwards,
yeah, Bev put it up there, so we are all good. Hey, Irene, this has been lovely. Thank you so much for being my guest today on Sewing in Slippers with Sue. If you want to reach out to me and have a guild program on rotary cut applique for your guild, you can contact me at SuePellinDesigns.com. I'm there on my website. I'm also in Facebook, and you can find me on Instagram. You can also watch Sewing in Slippers on YouTube, and you can like and subscribe on YouTube so that whenever we go live, every Tuesday at 11, you will be notified when we go live and we bring you some other great quilting tips and techniques. Irene, thank you so much. It was a pleasure to be with you here today. Bye, everyone.
Bye.